Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money and millennials. Welcome, world, to yet another episode of Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we like to talk about money and millennials. Sir, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. All is well. I'll say, to at the risk of beating a dead horse, I was a little disappointed when I saw you pull up in that SUV today and not the minivan that you promised me.
You tell me, sir, about this disappointment that you felt when you saw what now? Explain to me what you saw with your eyes, your own two eyes. Tell me what you saw, brother. Tell me what you saw.
I saw this new SUV
tell
that
me
you
now.
pulled up in that I was just a little disappointed that didn't have swiveling back seats that tuck into the floor and rows and DVD players and goldfish under the seats and all that stuff. So.
This is because Malcolm, the hater in Malcolm, was hoping and praying that I, as the new father of 3 children, would have to succumb to the drudgery of driving a minivan.
Okay,
Is that
don't
correct?
offend any of our minivan driving listeners.
No
okay?
shade to those who do drive minivans.
That was all shade.
I'm saying it wasn't for me.
Okay.
It wasn't for me.
Understood.
Do you like what we got?
It's all right. It's not a Honda Odyssey. But it gets you from point A to point B.
Indeed. When Malcolm has his kids, the first thing I'm going to suggest is that he and his wife get a van. Regardless, you can have one. I'm going to say you should get a van.
Well, I won't even have to respond because she'll laugh you out the same way you and your wife laughed me out for bringing it up to you.
Indeed. Well, for those who are wondering, if you haven't seen it on social media, my family, my wife and I, we ended up getting a Dodge Durango, which some people say is a dope boy car.
Did you get the V8 Hemi?
No, couldn't afford that.
Okay.
But I test drove one, and it was amazing.
Well, because that's the thing you add in that helps you still feel like I'm not driving the family car. But it also costs $50 to fill it up every 2 days.
The first thing we test drove of the Durangos was one with a Hemi. Mm-hmm. It sounded like a beast. But I'm a Californian, and such things would be seen as not eco-friendly, and also prohibitively expensive. More importantly, on a show called Manage Your Damn Money. But of course, this episode, we are doing a follow-up, a secondary piece to a previous episode, which aired recently. And if you haven't listened to that episode, you definitely want to listen to that before you listen to this. The topic that we're covering in this and the previous episode, understanding economic inequality and the policies being peddled to address it. As I mentioned, this is a 2-part series, and you're now listening and watching part 2. Malcolm, but before we get into that, it is now time for headlines. My daily Starbucks habit cost me $2,300 a year. Here's why I refuse to stop. And this was a December 2018 piece on CNBC.com by Sean M. Carter, not to be mistaken by or mixed up with that guy. Like most people my age, I don't have $17,000 in my savings account. I'm still paying student loans. My credit card balance isn't quite zero, and other mandatory expenses can eat away at my income. Would I take the opportunity to make the kind of money if given a chance? Of course, as long as it didn't require to do something silly like giving up my daily cup of Starbucks. This person, Sean M. Carter, I tracked my spending in 2018 to see how much I'd save if I cut back on my caffeine habit and how much I can earn if I invested the money instead. Here's what I found. So Sean's regular order of a grande chai tea latte with a shot of blonde espresso costs $6.04 with tax. That's $6.04 Monday through Friday, or $30.20 for the week. And $30 times 20 times 52 weeks in a year, that's about $1,570. He also goes on to say that he gets the warm butter croissant for $2.75 at least 3 times a week, plus another grande chai tea once a weekend when he's doing errands. The croissant costs him $429 a year. The extra coffee once per weekend comes in at $314 a year. His grand total spent on Starbucks and across 365 days, Malcolm, is about $2,300 and like a little bit of change. He said, experts may think I have a problem, Business guru and Shark Tank investor Kevin O'Leary never spends more than $2.50 on coffee. That's such a waste of money, he says, for something that costs 20 cents. He said, I'd never buy a frappe, latte, blah, 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 woof, 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 which sounds very Mr. Wonderful-ish thing to say.
That's what's funny about it. Like, you can hear that in his, and I actually have seen the video clip of him talking about it.
And it sounds like him.
It is his usual animated self.
Indeed, indeed. But Sean goes on to say, but I don't plan to give up Starbucks anytime soon, and other money experts say I don't have to. You can't cut your way to growth, says self-made millionaire Ramit Sethi. The idea of getting rich by buying less, he says, is horrible advice. Eliminating small, regular purchases is unlikely to help you save enough money to become wealthy. In other words, save your energy and focus on something that matters more.
That's terrible advice.
Is it terrible advice?
That is terrible advice.
So I think it's not terrible advice with like qualifiers.
So, as I said to you on one of our most recent shows, a friend of mine loves to quote his dad at me.
Right.
And the quote he loves to use is that you'll never get rich spending money.
That is true.
That is a mindset that has to follow you through all of the days of your life to allow you to get to the billionaire club or even the millionaire club.
Okay.
So for this person who is his financial Sherpa to tell him those little cuts here and there don't actually matter, don't worry about it, is nonsense in the sense that if you think that about too many things, you have all this erosion of cash that goes out of your bank account on a regular basis for silly stuff, that there's not anything there to now spend or save toward the things that are important. But if you look back over a lifetime of those erosions here and there, it actually does add up to a significant amount.
That's true.
So I'm not saying so much that buying Starbucks is a bad thing, right? I went to Starbucks this morning, and I paid less than $2.50 for my cup of coffee because I just get regular coffee.
I just get the regular.
However,
regular schmegular.
I also make my coffee at home more often than I go to Starbucks.
I see.
So I think it's just a mindset that you have to have, that you're foregoing certain things that are going to cost you money, that you're doing it in the interest of the bigger things that you want to get to eventually, but you still allow yourself those.
The thing that I take issue with, particularly on the other side of the coin, which is to say that you should save every last dollar and dime that you get, is that it puts forth the notion that you can build wealth through being miserly.
You can.
Not exclusively by being miserly.
Not exclusively, but more often than not, the people who become millionaires on accident, meaning they don't start some company that creates something that sells for a gajillion dollars, more often than not, those are the people who are miserly every day of their life and don't spend any money on anything.
That's the grandma who has
the
$1 million
millionaire next door, the teacher who becomes a millionaire making $50,000 a year. Like the way that those people get there is by not wasting money on
that comes at an incredible cost of missing out on day-to-day.
And that's why I'm wedged somewhere in the middle on this. I'm always somewhere in the middle in the sense that I have savings goals that I set every single year, and I set all of my savings on automatic contribution. So my 401k, my savings account, my investment account, everything I do is automatic. So it's going to happen by the time the year is over. With that said, now anything that shows up in my checking account that's not earmarked to go pay a bill, I know that I have there to have some fun. But all those savings goals that I have already been taken care of. And I think that allows me to live somewhere between both worlds and not feel like I'm missing out on life, but also not miss out on the opportunity to build wealth along the way.
Is there not the discussion in the personal finance world wherein people ask you to save every last thing and forego?
Oh, absolutely. You'll get the Susie Ormans of the world and people like that that'll get on a stage and pontificate for hours about how if you just cut out your habits of things like Starbucks,
your poor habits,
you're suddenly going to become rich like me. And that, you're right, that is absolute nonsense. Because you'll be miserable all the way there, and you'll never actually get a chance to enjoy anything. Or you'll be like some of the folks that I counsel now, some of the clients that I work with, that I can't convince them to spend $1 to save their life because the mindset that they had to have to amass the amount of assets that they have now into retirement.
It's so baked in.
It's so baked in. You can't flip a switch and suddenly say, okay, now I'm going to start to spend money on things and enjoy life. But the argument that I have against that, the challenge is you saved all that time to get here. Right. You are now at the place. You've been chasing this place for 30 years.
Right.
You're here.
Let's do something.
Let's do the things that you intended to be doing. And it's like, no. We don't want to spend money on that.
Let's just sit in our house and grow old and not enjoy it.
And so it becomes tough because, like I said, the mindset that got you there, it's tough to change all of a sudden now because you're there. Right. So I get your point, and I think that the true happiness lives somewhere in between. But you just can't be frivolously saying, Starbucks this and new shoes that and subscription to all of the different streaming services that exist and all those different things. Right. And I'm still going to, at some point, be able to save a significant amount of money to do things.
That is true. Well, you have heard the perspectives from Ben and Malcolm on saving versus investing and other things to actually build wealth. I want to remind you can catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and of course Spotify. Please, we beg of you, leave us a review on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch the show. If you have a question for us that you want us to answer or a subject you want us to cover, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com, or you can navigate to send us a message on our website at manageyourdamnmoney.com. And then, of course, you can always follow us on social media. My handle is @MYDM with a 1 on the end. Malcolm, how about yours?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
And, of course, that's on Twitter and on Instagram. And you can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where the conversation at hand for this episode, understanding economic inequality and the policies being peddled to address it. And of course, if you haven't heard, this is part 2 to a previous episode. So if you haven't caught that episode, please go back and watch it or listen to it. In our last episode of Manage Your Damn Money, we covered the basics behind the phenomenon known as economic inequality. Known as one of the causes of the falls of great nations like the Roman Empire, economic inequality is threatening to have an impact on us here in the United States in 2019. But there are several organizations and politicians in particular pushing new policies which purport to serve as a remedy to the increasing economic inequality we are seeing in our society. In this episode of MYDM, we are taking a look at the landscape of policies being proposed to address economic inequality, Malcolm. And a real quick recap of our last show. Essentially, we discussed what economic inequality is and what it looks like, right? Mm-hmm. Am I leaving anything off of the table there?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. What led to it, how we got here, right, and the different stances that people have on whether economic inequality even exists, for example.
Right. Well, the first article that we pulled for this show, the headline read, an exclusive look at Cory Booker's plan to fight wealth inequality. Give poor kids money. Baby bonds explain. Malcolm, you up here giving size. I thought this made sense. But anyway, let me make sure I explain it to the people. This was an October 2018 piece on Vox.com by Sarah Cliff. America has a massive growing racial wealth gap. The median white family today holds nearly 10 times the wealth of a median black family. Senator Cory Booker, he's a Democrat from New Jersey, is introducing a bill aimed at closing that gap. His idea is to give the lower income kids a sizable nest egg, nearly $50,000 in some cases, that they could use for wealth building purchases like a down payment on a house or college tuition. These dubbed opportunity accounts would theoretically make sure all children have significant assets when they enter adulthood, rather than just those who grew up in wealthier households. Malcolm, initially, I feel like you gave me vibes of it. How does a government program like this strike you?
The reason you heard that deep sigh from my side of the table is not even the fact that this is what Cory Booker wants to do. Not even the fact that Cory Booker is the one who proposed it.
Okay.
It's the fact that the folks who you have running for president in 2020,
which we should note that he is running for president,
are proposing some of the most outlandish, never gonna get it scenarios.
Never gonna get it. Go ahead.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I hope we don't have to pay for that sample.
It wasn't good enough for most people to recognize it.
That's probably fair. Anyway, so just the fact that like people like Cory Booker, Cortez, the things that they're proposing are so far out there that you can't even begin to have a realistic conversation about how to get there.
Okay.
Because this is a super serious thing that we're talking about.
Right.
You got a whole bunch of people graduating college with thousands and thousands of debt strapped to their back that's gonna haunt them for the first 20 plus years of their career, right? And you have a whole bunch of people who are being born into situations that they can't see any way out of, so they don't even bother to try in some cases, right? So I just feel like it's an opportunity and a platform for you to propose meaningful steps that we can actually get done in our lifetimes. Like, I'm only 31 and I don't think this will happen in my lifetime.
Right.
Granted, things happen fast. Sometimes when we have these shifts, these groundswells, they do actually take hold and move pretty quickly.
That's true.
But I just feel like the amount of opposition you have to go from 0 to 100 is not conducive to what you want to do. Whereas if you came in saying, I want to just go from 0 to 15 over the next 2 years, 4 years, I just want to get from 0 to 15. Can we get there? Then I think you have the ability to actually start to make a meaningful change.
Right.
But coming out trying to hit a grand slam at your first at bat, it's just not likely.
And let me come back to that grand slam idea real quick, but because I want to explain the rest of the program. Senator Booker's American Opportunity Accounts Act would give or would have given each child born in the United States a savings account with $1,000. Each year until the child turns 18, the government would deposit as much as $2,000 into that account. The size of the annual payments would depend on the child's family income, with lower income families receiving larger checks. These accounts would be off limits until the child turns 18, at which point the child could use them for specific asset building, quote unquote, purchases, like a down payment on a house or, for example, college tuition. Booker hasn't come up with a full list of eligible purchases, at least at the time of the writing of this article. Booker's office estimates that a child who remains in the lowest income bracket of the program, meaning he or she got the largest $2,000 payments each year, would accrue $46,215 by their 18th birthday. A child in the highest income bracket of the program, above 500% of the poverty line, or $147,000 for a year for a family of 4, would end up with just $1,600, just the original $1,000 payments plus earnings accrued from the government investing in low-risk funds. They also would projected that the benefits of the program would go largely to minority children. Their figures suggest that the average black child would accrue $29,000 in their account, and the average Latino child would get $27,000. The average white child would end up with about half, $15,000, or maybe a little closer to $16,000. Booker would pay for this opportunity account program by increasing capital gains and estate taxes, two changes that would target directly America's wealthier families. Now, you talked about a Grand Slam, which I wanted to address, which this is a really huge government program, I imagine, which would levy a hefty tax on the wealthy of those Americans who, make a certain amount. The reason, what I think I've come to learn in my older age is that, especially in politics, it's not even about actually thinking that the Grand Slam is going to work. If you think back to the Affordable Care Act, when Barack Obama proposed what the Affordable Care Act was, it was a change, but it wasn't a wholesale change, right? Now we're approaching the 2020 season, and what are people talking about? Medicare for all, right? Which is another step in the same kind of what the Affordable Care Act tried to do, which is kind of create a environment for everyone being covered for healthcare. But it's amazing for me to remember back then that the conversation wasn't what it is now. Like, people now accept that, like, yeah, people should have health care. They didn't think that back then.
So you've now pushed this in a direction that requires us to have this conversation for what it is. Okay. And not just, oh my God, this is beautiful where we've come. The key difference is Barack Obama proposed this being the first black president ever of the United States, right? And that's why it was immediately met with such opposition. It was, we don't want to have socialism here. We don't want to have blah, blah, blah. All the things that sound great as an opposition to it. That was proposed by Ronald Reagan. And they laughed him out of the chamber during the State of the Union address when he brought it up. A Republican who should be on Mount Rushmore the way they now fondly talk about him every chance they get, they being people running for president on the Republican side of the ticket. But that was a Ronald Reagan thing that came up that people had such strong opposition to. Fast forward to 2015 and 16, what happens? Bernie Sanders starts talking about Medicare for all, and all of a sudden, it's an acceptable thing to talk about. Aside from like 40 years and a lot of gray hair, the real differentiator between Bernie Sanders and Barack Obama, it's now coming from an old white guy. And so now it sounds a little more palatable because it's coming from that guy who I don't mind saying it's an okay idea.
Well, certainly, obviously that's a part of it.
Separately from that, most of the people you hear who have taken up that mantle now are Democrats who know that the only way they're going to get the attention of millennials like you and me is to propose the same things that Bernie Sanders, ironically the 70-something-year-old guy who got all these millennials to galvanize around him and vote for him, the only way they're going to be able to actually get the attention of our generation is to steal all the ideas from the guy who didn't win. So basically they said, if you want to get young people to come out and vote for you, be Bernie Sanders. And socialized medicine, Medicare for all, is the key thing that they have found that they can make the argument that, well, your guy made this argument back in the 80s. It's not that bad because your guy who you love so much, it's all politics.
Indeed. But to my point, I don't even think it's about like the full program. It's about iterative steps towards some idea or policy that might be helpful in some way.
But here's how Cory, but the reason I sighed like that, because I already knew where you were going. I read the article already. The way that that's going to be killed so fast before it ever even gets off the ground was buried in the last few lines you read. The fact that the majority of the money is going to go to black and Latino kids because they're disproportionately affected economically in all of these places. So what word do I have to use to kill this thing before it ever actually happens if I'm opposed to it? Reparations. All I have to say is Cory Booker is trying to bring reparations back to the table to be discussed in 2019, 2020. That thing is dead before it ever had a chance to breathe.
That's hilarious. That word
That's how politics works. And like, so I can have this conversation, I think. I hope I sound objective because I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat. But I know when you were trying to drive the people in one direction or the other, messaging is everything. Cory Booker is not a strong enough messenger on this thing to overcome the amount of vitriol that he'll be met with when people use that R word to brand this policy.
That's hilarious. I didn't even think about that. So I don't even need to ask these questions because I feel like we answered them. So we're going to take a quick music break instead. I want to remind you can always catch past episodes of our show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud as well, and on Spotify. Also, please leave us a review on any of those platforms. Let us know how we're doing. Give us a rating so more people can catch our show. And, of course, if you have a question for us, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can also catch us on social media. My handle is @MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
And, of course, that's on Twitter and Instagram. And you can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Politics. Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm.
Same.
Well, we're talking about understanding economic inequality and the policies being peddled to address it. In a previous episode, we discussed what economic inequality actually is. And also now in this episode, we're talking about some of the policies that people are peddling in different ways to actually address what economic inequality is. The next thing that we pulled, Malcolm, for this story is Elizabeth Warren's proposed tax on enormous fortunes explained. If you disliked the last thing in the last segment,
deep sigh number 2.
You're really going to hate this one. This was also a January 2019 piece on Vox.com by Matthew Iglesias. And of course, as we said, it's, presidential, what do you call it? Announcement
campaign
season.
Time.
So there are a lot of these policies floating around that are interesting and sometimes to some inspiring, so anyway. The story went on to say a 2% levy on assets more than $50 million and higher rates on billionaires. Senator Elizabeth Warren, she's a Democrat from Massachusetts, wants to curb spiraling inequality in the United States and make the rich pay, which feels like, yeah, right, in the U.S. But they report that the U.S. Berkeley economist Emmanuel Saez and Gabriel Zuckman are working with the presidential candidate on designing a proposal to levy a wealth tax on Americans with fortunes over $50 million. The basic plan is to levy a 2% tax on fortunes worth more than $50 million and a 3% tax on fortunes worth more than $1 billion. According to the Post, Saez estimates that this tax would hit approximately 75,000 families and raise $2.75 trillion over a 10-year period. Most taxes hit a flow of money, taking X percentage of your income or adding Y percentage to the cost of a purchase. A wealth tax instead hits stocks and assets. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is worth about $57 billion. A 3% tax on his fortune would cost $1.7 billion in the first year, and if applied year after year, could tax his fortune close to a lot. It was like a typo, but obviously that's a lot of money. Over the course of several decades, if the fortune did not accrue investment gains, I think it's saying it would tax it to zero. Maybe
It would tax his actual fortune to zero.
I'm not sure.
That's impossible.
It was a weird typo that didn't make sense.
That's the most un-American thing you said since we've been doing this show.
Malcolm, what's the primary pushback against taxes like these that address stock holdings and assets rather than wage-based taxes, particularly from the people who would be considered wealthy? Like, what's the main pushback there?
Well, the main pushback is the phrase I just used. That's un-American. Like, everything about America being a capitalist society and the land of opportunity, at least the way it's sold, is built on the fact that you can come here, make your fortune by pulling yourself up by those proverbial bootstraps, and nobody's going to stand in your way as long as you're working your butt off to make it happen. So if I'm somebody like Jeff Bezos, for example, who is, for now, the world's richest man, I did everything right. I built a company over my own lifetime. Amazon's only been alive like 20 years. So I did everything I was supposed to do. And you now are saying that because I was so successful at the thing that I do for a living,
I have to pay for that.
I have to pay you for my success? That doesn't make any sense. So the way that is introduced, just that concept alone, just doesn't even sound possible. Some
more factors that the article goes on to talk about that are kind of speak against the notion of taxing specifically the wealthy people at ridiculous rates. That's especially true because the mere existence of the wealth tax would, on the margins, encourage wealthy individuals to dissipate their fortunes on charitable giving and lavish consumption. If you try to hoard wealth and the government is going to tax it, you might as well spend it instead. This in turn exactly the standard economic case against wealth taxes. In a very basic sense, stripped down view, the accumulation of capital, buildings, machinery, business equipment, etc., leads to higher wages and living standards. A wealth tax, by discouraging the accumulation of financial capital, could also discourage the accumulation of physical capital and thus lead to lower wages and living standards. So it's a little bit of a flipped idea that, when people have a lot of money and they know it's going to be taxed, they try to get rid of it. Well, I mean, we know that functionally that's
you
probably
pay a lot
case.
of good tax attorneys to figure out ways for you to not have to pay any taxes.
Right.
In 2018, Amazon, the world's richest man, owns Amazon, paid 0 income taxes. So, I'm just going to give it away suddenly because I'm afraid of the big bad wolf that is the IRS. No, I'm going to hire 50 more high-priced lawyers to save me more than I would have had to pay.
So the first question about this, though, is does a wealth tax at this level feel like something that's helpful at all, even if you could apply it, like beyond tax loopholes and things that, wealthy people do to avoid it? Does it feel like that would actually be helpful in a meaningful way or no?
I don't know where the money goes. So that's the other part of the equation that Elizabeth Warren hasn't laid out yet. When you have that money, what did you say it is, like $200 billion or something that they're able to scrape together by taxing that 2% or so of people's fortunes? Then what do we do with that money? Are we going to use it to pay down the U.S.'s debt? Then I'm all for it. Because basically the folks who are making the laws right now that are like an average age of 65 or 70 probably, they're making these purchases and they're racking up this debt because they'll never live to see it come tumbling down. I will. I'm in my 30s. It's going to negatively impact me, and then ultimately any kids that I have will be negatively impacted even more so. So is she proposing that it's a one-for-one dollar we're able to collect versus dollar we'll use to pay down the debt? Then I'm 100% for it. President Warren, go ahead, do your business. But that's never going to happen. They're just going to use it to do more of the same, buy more weapons from Lockheed Martin, fund wars around the world, pay to insulate the senators from having to face the same health care costs and challenges that the rest of us do, inflate their government pensions that they get for the rest of their life and their security details. All of the nonsense that gets paid for through the taxes that they already collect are just going to get spent even more so. And our school systems are still going to continue to fall down to number 100 on a list of 101. They're not going to spend the money in the right place.
Might I step aside for a moment and say, Malcolm, your cynicism today is on level perfect. And it is quite amazing to listen to and hear. It's interesting. So you don't. So I have a question for you.
Sure.
It sounds like you would be a proponent in some way of seeing, if government, you wish to tax me, show me where my tax dollars go.
That's always been my issue with taxes. I do not mind paying taxes at the rate that the government determines is necessary and appropriate for a person who makes the income that I make. I've never had a problem with that. The problem that I do have is that when I pay my taxes, the government of the president of the United States decides to spend that money on building a wall to keep out the boogeyman. That is a misappropriation of funds. If he were running a nonprofit here in D.C., he'd be in jail, handcuffed, doing the perp walk for misappropriation of funds. If you ever get that title thrown at you, misappropriation of funds, you can't ever work again. But somehow, because I occupy 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, I'm allowed to get away with it, and nobody else is. Like those things that the government does, I just don't see why I need to pay any more taxes than Amazon, right? Like, if Amazon doesn't have to pay it, I shouldn't have to pay it, especially when the money's not going to go to help fund the public school in my neighborhood or help make the roads not be dirty when I drive to work every day. Anything like that that actually does benefit us. So, you know, I think more importantly, they need to start to make better financial decisions. Simply put, our federal government needs to manage its damn money.
You better plug.
I slid that one on in there.
Look at that, folks. Real quick, to kind of change it a little bit, some of what's out there on how to address economic inequality and other ills of the world say that wealthy people should pour their money or portions of their money into charitable giving, and some people say no, that's not exactly the same thing as it being taxed and reallocated in ways that are helpful. What do you say about the idea that charitable
I think that
giving
makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I think so. To take a step back, the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was put into place January 1 of last year actually negatively impacted charitable giving because you used to get a tax deduction for writing a check to support your favorite charity, and you would get actually that credited back to you at a prorated amount on your tax return. Now, because more people are going to be filing and taking a standard deduction than those who itemize and write off every single individual thing, you have less willingness to give that money away to, again, your favorite charity. That is I'll go out on a limb and assume unintended consequence of that, but I think the government could do more to build into the tax code forced philanthropy. Because if you gave me a tax benefit to give it away before you got a chance to get your hands on it the same way you do saving into my 401k or paying for my health insurance, I'm a lot more inclined than I would have ever been to now give money away to my favorite charity, which happens to be the TV studio that allows us to host our show here, right? So that kind of stuff should be built into the tax code, in my opinion, in a way that's meaningful, and that's how you immediately impact society. Because now I get to be on the stage scene giving away a check for $5 million, and I get a tax benefit from it, and the charity, most importantly, gets to do some good in the community that I, the billionaire investor, am never going to go do myself anyway. So it's a win for everybody involved.
That was an excellent argument you made, sir. Well, there are a couple other suggestions made by 12 experts on how you could end inequality if they ran America, Malcolm. And this was a piece on the WashingtonPost.com by Jeff Stein in April 2018. It read, "Imagine you had complete control of the U.S. government. What one thing would you do to reduce the country's staggering economic inequality?" They asked experts from around the ideological spectrum what they would do to address inequality if they were king or queen for the day. Malcolm, and the following are just a list of suggestions, which we hope you can understand what they mean just by the headline. The first thing on the list was massive expansion of local housing stock. We talk often about this show about the cost of housing in America, particularly in cities. Another item was universal access to child care, funded by a tax on capital and capital gains, which is what we just talked about. Number 3 was it says ship the 1% to Venezuela, which I guess there's like layers to that. Then another one was a big boost to union rights, universal social wealth fund. I can kind of understand what that means based on the title, but I'm not positive I understand it fully. Then another one was create a trust for every American baby, which kind of goes back to that Cory Booker proposal or an idea. Then also pick up the antitrust stick and wield it. Don't know what that means to you.
The antitrust stick meaning break up the largest corporations in the United States that have a stranglehold on basically everything.
There you go. All right. Next one, dramatically expand Social Security, which we always talk about maybe going bankrupt by the time that we need it. Give every American a federal savings account. Then another one is rein in Wall Street, crack down on white-collar crime. One of the final ones, a national infrastructure program funded by the 1%. There goes those 1% taxes again. Yeah. Get government out of the way, repeal rules and regulations. There's the good old trickle-down economics again.
Yeah, right.
And then a federal tax credit for first-time home buyers. Malcolm, we've discussed a lot about what politicians think, and in this case, some organizations and research institutes. How about us? Like, a lot of these things, in your view, because you don't trust the government to appropriate the funds correctly, you're saying taxes is not the way. Then there are some people who say, well, charitable donations are the way. And then there's some people that say, well, there is no way. You can't solve this problem. What is the way to address economic inequality if there are all these levers that don't quite address the issue?
Well, I don't think there's any one right way. I think all of them have to work together in order to create this perfect storm that helps get us there, which is why I mentioned, like creating that tax opportunity for donating money in a meaningful way. Separately from that, I'm not saying that taxes won't work. I'm saying they don't work in the way that they're currently structured. So if you would get rid of some of these ridiculous loopholes that allow people like Amazon to not pay any taxes at all, then you'll have more taxes coming in from the business revenues that exist that you don't have to worry about going after Jeff Bezos personally, because the company that he owns just paid its fair share. Like, we're not saying Amazon should have to pay any exorbitant amount above and beyond what everybody else pays just in relation to its bigness. I'm just saying Amazon should have to pay corporate income taxes, period. Because every other corporation in the United States is required to have to pay taxes, period. But if you can afford to buy your own staff of lobbyists to go fill the coffers of your favorite senators to vote in your way so that you never have to pay because the tax code's been favoring you, then what is there to stop you from doing it? So I think realistically, getting rid of those loopholes, creating those charitable donation deductions, all kinds of other programs that actually exist, a combination of all of those things happening at the same time will help to alleviate some of the pressures that are pushing down on the folks at the bottom ends of the income scales in such a disproportionate way that you run the risk of to your where you were going with it, that people just at some point feel hopeless and stop trying, and then you've got to worry about them storming the castle and overthrowing the king.
Indeed. My only thoughts on it, aside from like taxes going to where they're supposed to go in a way that makes sense, is that we kind of touched on this in previous episodes, where if as a society we decided that things could kind of go back to a previous time, probably more like our grandparents' time, where your work was worth more than just what it did right then. It was worth some investment into your future. We might get to a place where, some of these pressures could be alleviated, as you said. For instance, you work for a company, they do a little bit more than pay your salary. They, and are contributing to some down the line fund. Now, of course, obviously that's like a retirement account of some sort, but something in addition to it, meaning that being in business is about more than just making a lot of money. It's also about supporting and investing into the community that you're, serving. Those are kind of concepts that I think make sense, that ring true to me. I don't know if it's a solution at all.
The reason, though, that I won't say we can't get back there, but we're not likely to get back there.
Absolutely.
Is the reason that we're in the situation that we're currently in financially is because of the requirement from shareholders of these larger corporations we're talking about to continue to return me value by any means necessary. So whatever you have to do to turn a profit, I don't care who you have to hurt, who dies in the process, just get me my dividend and my return on my investment at the end of the year. Otherwise, I'm going to vote you out as the CEO, I'm going to vote you out as the board member, and we're going to get somebody else who is willing to do it. As long as that remains the mentality and the methodology, all these other behaviors that exist just to get to that end goal are going to continue to happen because they've got shareholders to answer to. And as I pointed out, before, 85% of all of the stocks in the market are held by 1% of Americans. So you have those people who aren't influenced or impacted by those decisions financially the way we're talking about, who don't have to worry about it. Right. So what if you don't have a pension? I want my dividend.
Right.
So what if you don't have health care? I want my return on my investment. And that becomes the overarching issue that these corporate CEOs are working to fix or working to deal with. And there's so much money in politics that these corporations also own the politicians who make the decisions that will never change that system as it currently sits. So,
and on that note, and on Malcolm's...
On that gloomy note,
on Malcolm's perfect episode of cynicism, I want to remind people you can always catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Please leave us a review and leave us a rating on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch our show. You can also send us a question if you have it, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can always catch us on social media. My handle on Instagram and on Twitter is @MYDM1. How about you, Malcolm?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, you can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/Manage Your Damn Money. Thanks to our partners here at Montgomery Community Media for another great show and our first of a 2-part series. Listen to this one, watch this one, go back and watch the one before, listen to the one before. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.